The sun, a cheerful spotlight, spilled across the freshly waxed floors of Sunny Meadow Middle School. Maya Rodriguez, clutching her worn leather satchel, inhaled deeply. The scent of floor cleaner and nervous anticipation hung heavy in the air. Today was the day. Principal Thompson, a man whose handshake could probably crack walnuts, greeted her in his office. Sunlight glinted off his bald head as he gestured towards a chair. "Ms. Rodriguez, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Sunny Meadow needs teachers with passion." He paused, his gaze intense. In a firm hand, Maya met his stare, a small smile playing on her lips. "I understand, sir. I'm eager to get started." He grunted, seemingly satisfied. "Sixth grade history. Room 203. They're a lively bunch. Don't let them walk all over you." He handed her a thick folder. "Everything you need is in there. Good luck." Room 203 buzzed with the chaotic energy of preteens. As Maya stepped inside, 30 pairs of eyes swiveled towards her, sizing her up. A wave of nervousness washed over her, quickly replaced by a surge of determination. This was it. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice projecting with surprising confidence. "I'm Ms. Rodriguez, and I'm your new history teacher." A few hesitant good mornings rippled through the room. One voice, louder and laced with sarcasm, cut through the rest. "Great. Another one." Maya scanned the room, her gaze settling on a boy slouched in the back row. He was bigger than the other students, with a sneer perpetually etched on his face. Jake Miller. His name was flagged in the file Thompson had given her, underlined twice in red ink. Ignoring him for the moment, she launched into her introduction, explaining her passion for history and her teaching philosophy. She emphasized the importance of respect, both for the subject matter and for each other. She wanted to create a classroom where everyone felt safe to share their thoughts and ideas. As she began outlining the curriculum, ancient civilizations, the rise and fall of empires, she noticed Jake was openly texting on his phone, occasionally muttering under his breath. A girl in the front row, Sarah Chun, kept glancing back at him with a worried expression. Sarah was petite, almost hidden behind her oversized glasses, but Maya sensed a quiet intelligence in her watchful eyes. "All right, class," Maya said, transitioning to the first lesson. "Let's begin with Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Can anyone tell me what made this region so important?" A few hands shot up, eager to answer. Sarah Chen's hand hovered hesitantly in the air. Before Maya could call on anyone, Jake Miller slammed his textbook shut, the sound echoing through the room. "This is boring," he announced, his voice dripping with boredom. "Who cares about some dusty old place?" A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the class. Maya took a deep breath, reminding herself of Principal Thompson's warning. She needed to establish control, but she also wanted to reach this boy. "Jake," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Every civilization, no matter how ancient, has something to teach us. Mesopotamia laid the foundation for much of what we know today. Understanding their history helps us understand ourselves." He rolled his eyes, a gesture that didn't escape Sarah Chen's notice. She subtly shook her head, as if pleading with him to stop. "Whatever," Jake mumbled, slouching even further in his seat. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled energy drink can, popping it open with a loud hiss. The sugary scent filled the air. Maya's patience frayed. "Jake, please put that away. And pay attention." He smirked, taking a long swig. "Make me the bully's target." Jake leaned back in his chair, the plastic creaking in protest. "Did you see what Ms. Rodriguez was wearing today?" he snickered, nudging Mark with his elbow. Mark, ever eager to please, snorted in response. "Seriously, who wears that much yellow?" Across the table in the crowded cafeteria, David, usually the more reserved of the trio, mumbled, "Leave her alone, Jake. She's new." Jake rolled his eyes. "New doesn't mean immune. Besides," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "she's practically begging for it. All sunshine and rainbows. Makes me want to puke." He mimicked gagging sounds, earning a chorus of laughter from Mark and a reluctant smile from David. "I'm just gonna test her. See how long she keeps up the happy act." He already had a plan forming in his mind, a series of small, irritating jabs designed to chip away at Maya's cheerful facade. He imagined the frustration simmering beneath her forced smile that barely contained anger. The thought was deliciously satisfying. The afternoon history lesson was about the Louisiana Purchase, a topic that seemed to bore Jake to tears. Maya, however, was animated, gesturing wildly as she explained the complexities of the deal. Her bright yellow blouse, a shade that screamed summer even in October, seemed to amplify her energy. "So, as you can see," she said, beaming, "this almost double the size of the United States." Jake raised his hand, a smirk playing on his lips. "Ms. Rodriguez." "Yes, Jake." Maya's smile didn't falter, but Sarah Chun, sitting 2 rows ahead, saw a flicker of something else in her eyes, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. "Was yellow the only color available back then? Because you seem to really like it." The class erupted in stifled giggles. Maya paused, her smile now definitely strained. "Yellow is a cheerful color, Jake, and it reminds me of sunshine. Now, can we please get back to the lesson?" Jake leaned back again, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Just asking," he mumbled, loud enough for the nearby students to hear. He caught Mark's eye and winked. The game had begun. Sarah Chun felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Jake's comment had been rude, unnecessary. She glanced at Maya, whose face was now carefully neutral as she continued her lecture. She seemed determined to ignore Jake's barb, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. She wished she could say something, do something, but she was always so quiet, so invisible. The bell signaling the end of class rang, and Sarah quickly packed her things, wanting to escape the uncomfortable tension that had settled over the room. As she hurried out, she saw Jake and his friends huddled together, whispering and laughing. Their eyes flicked towards Maya, who was erasing the whiteboard. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just harmless teasing. This was something else entirely. Escalating disrespect. The rustle started small, a barely audible crinkle of paper. Maya tried to ignore it, focusing on the timeline of the Roman Empire she was sketching on the whiteboard. But the rustling intensified, morphing into a distinct ripping sound. She glanced up. Jake Miller, surprise, surprise, was meticulously folding a sheet of notebook paper. Not into neat, geometrical angles, but into something aggressively pointy. "Jake," she said, her voice calm but firm, "are you planning on contributing to the lesson today?" He didn't look up. He just kept folding, his brow furrowed in mock concentration. Other students were starting to watch, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Maya felt a familiar tightening in her chest. This was becoming a daily ritual, a subtle, escalating campaign of disrespect. Then it launched. A poorly constructed paper airplane wobbled haphazardly across the room, nose-diving into Maria Sanchez's hair. Maria shrieked, swatting at it like a particularly aggressive insect. The class erupted in giggles. "Jake, that's enough," Maya said, her voice sharper this time. "Go to the principal's office. Now." He finally looked up, a slow, insolent grin spreading across his face. "Make me." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Maya took a deep breath, reminding herself of the carefully crafted strategies she discussed with Mrs. Davison. Don't engage. Document everything. Stay professional. But professionalism felt like a flimsy shield against Jake's relentless antagonism. "Jake," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper, but amplified by the sudden silence of the room. "This is not a request. It's an instruction." He remained seated, slouched in his chair, radiating defiance. He picked at a loose thread on his jeans, completely ignoring her. From the back of the room, Sarah Chun cleared her throat. Maya saw a flicker of concern in Sarah's eyes, a silent offer of support. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. "Okay," Maya said, turning back to the whiteboard, forcing herself to keep her voice even. "Let's move on. As I was saying, the Roman Empire." She continued her lecture, but her hand trembled slightly as she drew a line on the timeline. The image of the paper airplane, tangled in Maria's hair, burned in her mind. She could feel Jake's eyes on her, a constant, unsettling pressure. Every cough, every shuffle of feet, sounded like another deliberate act of sabotage. The weight of the class, the weight of Jake's disrespect, pressed down on her, stealing the air from her lungs. She knew she was losing them, one paper airplane, one insolent grin at a time. And the thought terrified her. The spilled juice. The staff lounge was a temporary sanctuary. Maya carefully unwrapped her homemade sandwich, hummus, sprouts, and roasted red peppers on whole wheat. It smelled earthy and comforting, a small victory against the day's general chaos. Mrs. Davison, the art teacher, perched on the edge of the worn sofa, sketching furiously in a small notebook. "Rough morning?" Maya asked, already knowing the answer. Mrs. Davison sighed, not looking up. "Sixth graders in glitter. Need I say more?" Maya chuckled. Jake Miller decided my lesson on Mesopotamia needed more modern flair by throwing a crumpled paper airplane at the board every 5 minutes. She took a bite of her sandwich, the sprouts adding a satisfying crunch. "That kid, he's got a defiance streak a mile wide," Mrs. Davison muttered, shading in a particularly intricate swirl on her page. "He's testing you, Maya. Don't let him win." Maya knew she was right. She just wasn't sure how to win without stooping to his level. She finished her sandwich, the quiet conversation a brief respite before returning to the battleground that was her classroom. As she rinsed her reusable container in the tiny sink, she noticed Jake and his usual entourage huddled by the water fountain outside the lounge. Their hushed voices and sidelong glances prickled her skin. All right, chill," Jake hissed, shoving Mark lightly. "Just gotta time it right. She always walks past the table with that green juice thing." He mimed bumping into someone, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Dude, are you sure?" Kevin asked, nervously adjusting his glasses. "What if you get caught?" Jake rolled his eyes. "Relax. It's an accident. What's she gonna do, give me detention? I already have, 5 this week." He nudged Mark again. "Just be ready to laugh. It'll be epic." Maya, her stomach tightening, grabbed her bag and headed out of the lounge. She deliberately took a different route to the cafeteria, hoping to avoid the inevitable. But as she navigated the crowded tables, balancing her tray with its small carton of green juice, she saw him. Jake was standing a few feet ahead, ostensibly talking to Kevin, but his eyes were locked on her, a predatory glint in their depths. She tried to subtly shift her path, but it was too late. Just as she passed him, Jake lurched forward, his shoulder slamming into her arm. The juice carton flew from her hand, erupting in a sticky, green explosion. It splattered across her blouse, her jeans, and the floor around her. A wave of icy humiliation washed over her. The cafeteria erupted in laughter, Jake's the loudest and most triumphant. He doubled over, clutching his stomach as if in genuine mirth. Mark and Kevin joined in, their laughter echoing through the room. Maya stood frozen for a moment, the sugary liquid dripping from her hair. Her face burned. But then, she took a deep breath, the KRAV MAGA training kicking in. Instead of yelling, instead of crying, she met Jake's gaze. Her eyes, usually warm and welcoming, were now hard and unwavering. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Accidents happen, Jake," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She bent down, picked up the empty juice carton, and walked towards the nearest trash can, ignoring the snickers and jeers that followed her. The sweet, cloying smell of spilled juice filled her nostrils, a constant reminder of the battle she was now determined to win. A calm request, a rude refusal. The stench of stale pizza and cheap soda hung heavy in the air. Crumpled paper airplanes littered the floor, sticky projectiles clung to the chalkboard, and a half-eaten bag of chips lay desecrated on her desk. Maya surveyed the scene, a tableau of sixth-grade rebellion orchestrated, she suspected, by the boy smirking in the back row, Jake Miller. She took a deep breath, focusing on the knot of calm she'd practiced that morning. "Jake," she said, her voice even, "I'd like you to come to the front of the class, apologize for this situation, and help me clean it up." The smirking widened into a full-blown grin. Jake leaned back in his chair, the plastic groaning under his weight. "Apologize for what, Ms. Rodriguez?" "Showing my school spirit." He gestured vaguely at the mess with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Looks like a party to me." A ripple of snickers ran through the room, emboldening him. "This isn't a party, Jake. This is disrespectful and disruptive. You know it was wrong. Just say you're sorry and let's get this cleaned up." Maya kept her voice measured, but a muscle twitched in her jaw. The calm was fraying. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. Jake pushed himself up, sauntering to the front with a theatrical swagger. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could smell the artificial blueberry scent of his vape. "Okay, Ms. Rodriguez," he drawled, his eyes gleaming with insolence. He bowed low, a mocking parody of respect. "I'm so sorry that you can't handle a little harmless fun." He straightened up, letting out a bark of laughter. The class erupted with him. Maya clenched her fists, digging her nails into her palms. She fought back the urge to yell, to unleash the frustration that was building inside her like a pressure cooker. This wasn't just about the mess. It was about the blatant disrespect, the deliberate undermining of her authority. She imagined the satisfying crunch of his nose under her fist, the stunned silence that would follow. KRAV MAGA promised control, not necessarily restraint. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing her serene meditation space. The scent of lavender, the gentle chime of a Tibetan singing bowl. It wasn't working. Not today. When she opened her eyes, Jake was still there, grinning triumphantly, basking in the adulation of his classmates. "So, Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "are we done here? Or do you need a hall pass to cry to the principal?" The laughter intensified. Maya's vision narrowed. This wasn't just a refusal, it was a declaration of war. And she was starting to think she was ready to fight. The after-school prank. The bell shrieked, freeing the last stragglers from detention. Jake, feigning a yawn, lingered near Maya's desk, pretending to gather his things. He was actually eavesdropping. "I'll see you all at robotics in 10, Maya said, her voice laced with the weary patience of a saint dealing with sinners. Sarah Chin nodded, packing her laptop with quiet efficiency. Robotics. Jake grinned. He'd been looking for an opportunity, and Maya had just gift-wrapped it. Later, huddled behind the bleachers with Ben and Kyle, Jake outlined his plan. "She's got the stupid jacket, right? All patched up and artisanal, or whatever. I'm thinking we borrow it. Then, strategic application of paint bombs." Ben snorted. "Paint bombs? Where are we going to get paint bombs?" "Leave that to me," Jake said, already picturing the carnage. He'd swiped a few eggs from the cafeteria earlier. A quick trip to the art room for tempera paint, some balloons from a forgotten birthday party stash, and he was in business. Kyle, usually the most enthusiastic, seemed hesitant. "Dude, isn't that going a bit far? It's just a jacket." "Exactly. It's just a jacket," Jake sneered. "But it's her jacket. She practically lives in the thing. Imagine her face when she comes out of robotics, and it's covered in purple and green goo. The whole school will see." He punched his fist into his palm for emphasis. "Think of the humiliation." The image seemed to sway Kyle, who nodded slowly. All right. I'm in." Back in the classroom, Sarah Chun watched Maya sorting through papers, a tired slump to her shoulders. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Sarah chewed on her lip, debating. Should she warn her? Jake was escalating, that much was clear. It had started with whispers and rude comments, but now, this felt different. More calculated. She glanced at Maya's patched denim jacket hanging on the back of her chair, a splash of color in the otherwise drab room. The jacket represented something, Sarah realized. It was a symbol of Maya's individuality, her refusal to conform. And Jake was going to try and destroy it. But saying something meant becoming a target herself. It meant facing Jake's wrath, his relentless taunts. Sarah hesitated, the weight of her silence pressing down on her. She looked at Maya again, saw the faint lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes. The bell for after-school activities rang, its sharp tone slicing through the air. Time was running out. The confrontation. The air in the art room hung thick with the scent of turpentine and anticipation. Maya smoothed the wrinkles from the butcher paper covering the tables, the fluorescent lights humming a monotonous tune above her. She'd spent weeks planning this anime club, painstakingly crafting posters and securing funding. Now, the first meeting was only minutes away. She carefully arranged the manga volumes she'd borrowed from the library, their vibrant covers a stark contrast to the room's institutional beige. Her fingers traced the spine of Spirited Away, a familiar comfort in the face of her rising anxiety. A floorboard creaked outside the door. Maya paused, brush poised over a jar of water. Probably just old Mr. Henderson doing his nightly rounds. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She dismissed it, attributing it to nerves, and returned to her preparations, carefully taping character templates to the easels. The lights flickered, plunging the room into a momentary darkness. When they sputtered back to life, Jake Miller and his usual entourage were lounging against the doorway, their grins predatory. The air immediately shifted, the scent of turpentine now tainted with something acrid, like burnt sugar and malice. Well, Jake drawled, pushing himself off the doorframe. Look what we have here. A little after-school playtime. Maya clenched her jaw, the taste of bile rising in her throat. This is a closed event for club members only, Jake. You're not on the list. Her voice, she noted with frustration, trembled slightly. He sauntered further into the room, his friends fanning out behind him, effectively blocking the exit. Oh, but we are interested. Very interested. Aren't we, boys? A chorus of snickers rippled through the group. Maya stood her ground, placing herself between Jake and the table laden with manga. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Jake's eyes narrowed, focusing on her worn leather jacket. That's a nice jacket, Ms. Rodriguez. Real nice. I bet it'd look even better ripped. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched, reaching for her. Time seemed to slow. Maya saw the glint of triumph in his eyes, the expectation of easy victory. But beneath the surface of her carefully constructed calm, a different kind of energy surged. Years of training, of disciplined movements and honed reflexes clicked into place. As Jake lunged, Maya didn't hesitate. She pivoted on the ball of her foot, the movement fluid and almost impossibly fast. His fingers brushed against empty air where her jacket had been a split second before. He stumbled, caught off guard by her unexpected agility. The room was silent, the only sound Jake's ragged breathing. His friends stared, their smug expressions replaced with stunned disbelief. Maya stood poised, her gaze unwavering, the soft fluorescent light reflecting in her dark eyes. The gentle hum of the lights seemed to amplify the heavy silence. KRAV MAGA surprise. Jake Miller swaggered closer, his meaty hand outstretched, aiming for the edge of Maya's new blazer. Come on, teach. Just a little rip. For old time's sake. His breath reeked of cherry cola and something sour. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum solo. She'd hoped he wouldn't actually try anything. But the glint in his eyes, the smirk plastered across his face, this wasn't a joke. She took a shallow breath, channeling the calm focus instructor Abby had drilled into her. Protect yourself. Sarah Chun, perched on a desk near the window, chewed her lip, her eyes darting between Maya and the door. Should she warn her? Get help. It was all happening so fast. I wouldn't do that, Jake, Maya said, her voice surprisingly steady. She shifted her weight slightly, her senses on high alert. He ignored her, reaching again, his fingers brushing the fabric of her blazer. That was it. In a blur of motion, honed by years of training, Maya executed a KRAV MAGA technique she hadn't anticipated using outside the dojo. It was instinctive, a response ingrained deep within her muscle memory. She stepped forward, pivoting on her left foot, simultaneously using her right arm to deflect Jake's reaching hand. With her other hand, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it in a swift, fluid motion. Jake yelped, a high-pitched sound that was almost comical. He stumbled forward, off balance, and Maya used his momentum to guide him into a controlled fall, easing him onto the floor. He landed with a surprised oof, his wrist throbbing. A stunned silence fell over the room. The other students, who had been snickering and egging Jake on, were now gaping at Maya, their faces a mixture of shock and awe. Even Sarah looked stunned, her jaw hanging open. Are you okay, Jake? One of his friends, a lanky kid named Kyle, asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Jake scrambled to his feet, clutching his wrist. What the hell was that? He sputtered, his face flushed crimson. Maya stood her ground, her chest heaving slightly. That, she said, her voice firm, was a demonstration of what happens when you disrespect personal boundaries. Now I suggest you leave. This is a club meeting, and you're not welcome. Before Jake could retort, the door swung open. Principal Thompson stood in the doorway, his brow furrowed. He surveyed the scene, Jake Miller looking disheveled and furious, Maya Rodriguez standing tall and composed, and a room full of teenagers frozen in place. "What in the world is going on here?" he asked, his voice booming. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the students. "Ms. Rodriguez, I trust you have a good explanation for this." He was a tall, imposing man, but he had a soft spot for new teachers, especially the passionate ones. And he had seen the fire in Maya's eyes during her interview, a fire he admired. He needed teachers who cared, who wouldn't back down. A lesson learned. Principal Thompson's voice boomed through the suddenly silent hallway. "Miller! What in the world is going on here?" Jake, wrist throbbing like a persistent drumbeat, could only stammer, She attacked me." Thompson's gaze, sharp and unwavering, shifted to Maya. She stood tall, her breathing steady, a stark contrast to Jake's disheveled fury. "Ms. Rodriguez, do you care to explain?" Maya recounted the events calmly, her voice clear and even, omitting none of Jake's initial taunts or his attempt to grab her blouse. Several students, witnesses to the scene, nodded in agreement. The principal's face darkened with each word. "Miller, my office." "Now!" Thompson barked, his voice leaving no room for argument. Jake shot a venomous look at Maya before trudging after the principal, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The next day dawned gray and drizzly. Jake stood on the steps of a school, a handwritten apology clutched in his sweaty hand. The principal had insisted he read it aloud during lunch. He scanned the crowd, a sea of faces, some curious, some mocking, but all fixed on him. When he spotted Maya, standing near the entrance with a group of her friends, his stomach churned. He cleared his throat, the microphone amplifying the sound. I want to apologize to Ms. Rodriguez," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. He forced himself to look up. "I was wrong. I said some horrible things, and I acted disrespectfully. I am truly sorry for my behavior." The words felt like shards of glass in his mouth. A tense silence hung in the air. Then, Maya stepped forward. "I accept your apology, Jake." Her voice was surprisingly gentle. "And I appreciate you saying it publicly." She paused, then a small smile played on her lips. "Actually, Jake, we could use someone with your organizational skills in the debate club. We're preparing for a big competition." Jake blinked, stunned. "Join her club? After everything?" He hesitated. Then, seeing the genuine invitation in her eyes, he nodded. "Okay. I'll try." The rain seemed to lessen as the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As Maya walked towards her classroom, she noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Students who had previously dismissed her as just another teacher now regarded her with a newfound respect. They saw her not only as an instructor, but as someone who stood up for herself and offered forgiveness. In class that afternoon, Maya lectured on the intricacies of persuasive rhetoric. Jake sat in the front row, actually paying attention. He even raised his hand and asked a thoughtful question, something he had never done before. Maya answered with patience and clarity, and Jake found himself genuinely engaged. He still felt a prickle of shame, but for the first time, it was mixed with a glimmer of hope. He had a lot to learn, not just about debate, but about respect, humility, and the power of forgiveness. He glanced at Maya, her eyes shining with passion as she spoke, and realized that the lesson he was learning extended far beyond the classroom walls.